for today's video comes from my Twitch stream. If you want to catch more Splatoon action live, you can check out the stream at twitch.tv/thejwits. Hello fellow Grisco employees, it's Jwits here with another Splatoon 2 video. It's no secret that the new cooperative Salmon run mode is by far my favorite part of Splatoon 2. It's chaotic, unique, and rewarding, but leveling up and maintaining high ranks to rake in more rewards can definitely be challenging and intimidating. Since Salmon Run is completely cooperative and having more informed players means that there's a better chance that you will succeed with random teammates out in the wild, I wanted to share 50 tips that I think can help you destroy the Salmonids, collect your paycheck, and make your way up to Profreshional. We'll start with a collection of 20 basic tips, and then move to more segments for each of the game's unique bosses and random events. First things first, if you just want general information about everything Salmon Run can throw at you, read the game's manual. There's 2 of them, which can be accessed by pressing the minus button from the main menu. They're a fun read and contain a pretty solid foundation for learning more about the mode. The opening tutorial is nice, but the manual covers a lot more that you won't find there. Too often, I see new players jump into Salmon Run without any knowledge of the weapons that you're about to use. You don't get to pick your weapons in this mode. You are randomly assigned 1 weapon out of the set of 4, and that changes for all 3 waves. As long as you're a high enough level to actually unlock the weapon, I highly recommend demoing any weapon that you've never used before from your weapon set over at Sheldon's. You can demo any weapon for free, even if you never plan on buying it. Splatoon gives criminally few options for communicating with random teammates, which makes the D-pad up this way command all the more important. Use this command to let your teammates know the location of bosses and eggs. It gets hectic, and sometimes I'm looking for eggs and I have no idea where they've been dropped. This way, every day. Also, this isn't Overwatch. You don't have to worry about asking for healing. When you've been splatted, your D-pad up command becomes an SOS signal. Spam it. Your team loses if everybody gets splatted, so it's often in the team's full interest to know where all down players are at all times. Making a run between eggs and the basket is a world of difference when you have ink in your color. Always use the time immediately after a wave ends and immediately before a wave begins to ink relevant territory around your basket and beyond. I often see people just messing around or intentionally jumping off the stage in between rounds. Don't do this. Just because the timer ends doesn't mean that there still isn't work to do. It took me forever to notice this, but the lifesaver on your back actually shows your ink supply. As it drains color to white, you get closer to emptying out. I actually think it's easier to follow this in the game's normal ink tank, but I just didn't even know to look for it for a while. New players often forget that Salmon Run has 2 objectives. The first is obvious: collect enough eggs before your timer runs out. The second, don't die. If all 4 of your players go splat, you lose. Too often I see players go greedy for eggs at situations where the timer is too low to even bring them back to the basket. Having more eggs than you needed for objective but dying because your team got greedy feels awful. Similarly, don't be too defensive. Turtling for a full round won't do you any good if you don't at least hit your egg minimum. If you've hit your egg quota already and time is running low, sometimes the best strategy is simply to run away. Split up and try and find a corner of the map where no major bosses have spawned. Even if you're splatted, you still hold on to an egg if you were carrying one before you died. Floating as a splatted player back toward the basket can help you make a quick delivery when you arrive. Also, even when you are splatted, you can still run over to an egg and collect one if you haven't already. You can't deliver the egg to the basket until you've revived, but this can actually be a good opportunity to pick up an egg in a dangerous territory before it disappears. Speaking of which, it's usually a better idea to fight bosses and collect eggs with at least 2 other players near you instead of trying to go Rambo solo. When you defeat a boss, they drop 3 eggs, and if you wait too long, the Snatcher will take your eggs away. While sometimes it's too hectic to work as a full group, having at least 1 buddy with you helps you at least take 2 of those 3 eggs back after you beat a boss. The game's heads-up display actually tells you whenever a teammate has an egg in that small little icon here at the top left. Keeping an eye on this can give you a good idea of how many potential eggs your team could deliver in a small amount of time, and it also lets you know which players might be a good idea to revive first if you're short on your quota. Specials in Salmon Run work differently. They don't build up over time, and you have 2 and only 2 charged specials that you can drop over the course of all 3 waves. It's easy to forget to use them, which can feel really dumb if your team got wiped and you left some specials unused. On the flip side, if your team is surviving fine without the use of specials, keep them pocketed as long as you can. The 3rd wave is usually the hardest. Also, if you're in an absolute pinch and completely out of ink, using your special not only can help turn the game around, but it completely refills your normal weapon's ink supply as well. Players often forget that everyone has the Splat Bomb as a secondary in this mode. While the Splat Bomb is crucial for some bosses, it's also a decent tool for damaging enemy mobs while giving you a long-range attacking option to complement short-range weapons. It uses a lot of ink, but it does have its uses. As you build your rank, you'll get a higher percentage pay based on the amount of eggs that you were able to collect. In general, Wave 3 is the dream. If you lose at Wave 1 or 2, your rank will drop. But if you lose in Wave 3, even if you get crushed, your rating won't change at all. And of course, if you win in Wave 3 with a team that has an equal or higher tier than you, your bar will go up. So in general, you want to do everything you can to make it to Wave 3, and you'll never lose rating. As your rank increases, bosses appear more often, and the minimum eggs you need for each round goes up. Keep in mind that you may have to adjust your playstyle in later ranks, favoring riskier options to help your team bring more eggs into the basket in time. There are some amazing rewards to collect from each session of Salmon Run, but I still hear from time to time on my streams that people don't know where to collect them. Once you have gotten some Salmon Run prizes, you can get them here at the counter to the left of Grizco. Unfortunately, you have to walk there. 1200 points is the magic number to build for any multi-game session of Salmon Run. Each time slot has 2 600-point super bonus capsules, which have great rewards. After 1200, your rewards for the rest of the day are gear and only gear. So there isn't nearly as much incentive to go past 1200 if you're only interested in the rewards. And if you're wondering which color drops what, here's a helpful chart from Splatoon Wiki. The super bonus capsules always get that 10% reward drop in the right column. But in general, that's a lot of good stuff. All this right here is why it's worth your time learning and improving in this mode. And finally, here's a tip for clothing swapping when you get the same piece of gear that you've already owned. You'll be offered a chance to switch. Do not be an idiot like me and misunderstand this. The left button gives you a reward and lets you keep the gear that you already own on the left. The right button will let you keep new clothing on the right and replace the gear that you already own on the left. Left button keeps the left gear, right button keeps the right gear. So that's everything for my basic tips, but let's move on to the real challenge of these modes, the bosses and events. Here's some tricks that I've learned to help deal with some of the tougher parts of Salmon Run. The Steelhead. The Steelhead can be an annoying enemy because it can only be damaged from firing that bomb sack while it is connected to its head. This is a small window, so trying to get a hit from a short-range weapon on the ground is usually a battle not worth fighting. Thankfully, even if you only partially damage the Steelhead, this damage is still remembered even after it throws the bomb. This is true for most Salmon Run bosses, but it's good to know for the Steelhead since it visually looks like it's throwing off all of its damage away at first. Thankfully, despite the fact that its bomb will kill you in one hit, the Steelhead has horrible range and is really slow. It won't even attempt to attack unless one of you is right next to it. Of all the major Salmon Run bosses, the Steelhead is probably the one that can be ignored for the longest time without major harm. The Steel Eel. It seems that the Steel Eel only chases after one player at a time. If you notice it targeting you, lead it away from the pack so that a teammate can hit its back. Avoid bringing it back to your basket at all costs. It becomes miserable to deliver eggs when this happens and can sometimes help contribute to a team wipe. Also, you can't hit the Steel Eel through itself. It's made of invincible splash walls, and even though it looks like your ink could go through it, it can't. Don't try and snake around, just leave it to a teammate. The Drizzler. The Drizzler's only main attack is to fire a missile that explodes into an obnoxious ink storm. Thankfully, this attack can be stopped completely if you deflect the missile, which hovers in the air for a second or two. You can track where it's about to fire by paying attention to the scope when it's in its protected mode. As long as you knock the missile down, the ink storm won't fire. If you want to go one step further, you can position the missile between you and the Drizzler to fire the missile right back for an instant kill. Literally matumboing it out of existence. While simply shooting the missile down is way more important than getting this cool instant kill, it's a nice option to have which allows you to quickly work on to the next problem. Maws. The Maws lurks underground before striking out of nowhere from below. In general, keep your eyes out for that red fishing bobber above ink. That's your clue that it's coming. Like the Steel Eel, it will follow only one player at a time until it jumps out of the water. A lot of players seem to have trouble throwing a bomb to instantly kill Maws instead of firing on it for several cycles. Your visual cue should be this green ring that appears on the ground, which is a warning that it's about to jump. Throw your bomb onto the ring to guarantee that the Maws ingests your tasty explosive treat. Don't wait for it to pop out of the ink. By that point, you're too late. The Scrapper. The Scrapper is number 3 on my list of Salmon Run bosses that I prioritize when picking out a group to kill. It's not because it's that threatening on its own, but it has a huge effect on your group that you may not notice. It spreads a lot of ink as it moves. If you leave it alone for too long, it will completely cover your territory in enemy ink, ruining your movement. The Scrapper can be temporarily stunned if it takes enough damage to the front, which is a great start, but it can only be splatted if shot in the back. Too often I see players stun it from the front and then keep shooting it at the front. Once you've seen it spark and shut down, you're safe to take it down from the other side. The Stinger. The Stinger is number 2 on my list of enemies that you want to deal with right away. It fires through walls across the entire stage and can easily splat you from anywhere on the map. This isn't like the Steelhead. It doesn't wait to fire. It will immediately work to try and ruin your crew. Thankfully, it's also the easiest enemy to solo, requiring only a short stream of fire to take out all of its pots. And if you see a teammate trying to take it down but you just don't have the range to get to it, feel free to help them clean it up by throwing a splat bomb their way. The freaking Flyfish. The Flyfish is by far the #1 worst boss to deal with in Salmon Run. Its missiles ruin your life for your entire team, pinning you down into enemy ink and contributing to a gross percentage of team splats. This is the big one. Unless your timer is short and you're in survival mode, the Flyfish should be your #1 priority. Getting a good bomb throw onto one of the 2 baskets is annoying, but so often I see people just chuck it. If you hold R for just a second longer, the game gives you a pretty detailed trail on where your bomb is going to land, making it a lot easier to make sure that your shot goes in the basket. Also, when playing with randoms, I've found waiting for just a second is helpful for making sure that you get a bomb in each basket instead of doubling up. Wait for just a brief moment to see if someone throws first, and if not, my rule of thumb is to pick the basket that's closest to you. And for some reason, if you don't have a teammate at hand, you actually do have a chance to get both bombs in by yourself. It's pretty frustrating to wait for the ink to reload, but it's absolutely doable as long as you don't have too many other threats nearby. And you can hit a bomb shot from behind the back. This isn't really a tip, I'm just bragging that I did it the one time. And finally, my biggest tip against the most obnoxious enemy, use the Stingray. This special is super situational in the main game, but in Salmon Run it is king. It melts through most armor, destroying drizzlers, scrapping scrappers, and yes, even the freaking Flyfish. No bombs required, just aim the Stingray right at the center of the character, and after a few hits, it's toast. If you're the Stingray holder on your team, an early Flyfish kill is always appreciated. That's everything for the main bosses, but here's some final thoughts on the game's random events, or as they're called in Salmon Run, known occurrences. Tide events. Look at the overlay at the bottom of the screen to find out which tide is approaching earlier. It's hard to tell at first, but this gray wave overlay actually tells you the height of the upcoming tide. During the low tide event, the basket will always be on the shore. Also, this is by far the easiest mode to run away once you've hit your egg total, but the enemies are still looking scary near the beach. Nothing spawns on this regular part of the map, so you can just run away and survive almost every single time. High tide is one of the toughest events in the game because you have less space to work with. In general, I think it's valuable in this mode to focus on downing bosses as quickly as possible, even if it means leaving a few eggs out to dry. You can't win if you're dead, and high tide makes it pretty easy to be dead. The fog event. This is probably one of the easiest events in the game, but in general, my tip is similar to something you've heard before. Use this way to help your teammates and find the next boss. Just use this way even harder than you normally would. The rush event. During the rush event, waves dash after the player that has glowflies next to them, and the terrifying Goldie is the only character that drops eggs. Because the waves come in so heavily, it's in your best interest to work as a team from the basket. Your eggs will end up spawning right next to the basket, it'll be easy to bring them back in, you'll be able to revive each other, and you'll always have a good idea of where the enemy is coming from. The Griller. Just like the Steel Eel, the Griller event boss follows one player and has an exposed back. Unlike the Steel Eel, it turns and moves way faster. If you have the laser pointer on you, you have to drag the Griller away from your team to expose it. It's way more difficult to solo than the Steel Eel, so teamwork is huge here. Cohort Charge. This event is one of the easier ones, but you have to learn how those ink cannon turrets work. They fire high-powered rockets that destroy mobs and bosses, but it uses your ink, so you'll have to get out and refill once you run out. Also, despite how it looks, you are not safe in the turrets. A Moz or Flyfish can completely wreck you if you stay sitting in it too long. Goldie Seeking. In this event, you'll try and find the Goldie hidden in one of many valves across the stage. For every wrong guess, you end up spawning a bunch of enemies. One way to minimize how many enemies appear is by looking at the geyser that shoots up. The taller it is, the closer you are to the Goldie. So if you pop one and it's super short, don't even bother with breaking down anything near it, try checking out a valve on the other side of the map. If you've hit your egg quota and you don't want to mess things up in the last few seconds, one thing you can do is nothing. Enemies only spawn when you break these valves down, so if you do nothing, nothing can go wrong. Clean the base, have a party, it's a nice way to relax in an otherwise hectic game mode. The Mothership. During the Mothership event, you have to destroy the floating enemies before they drop their crates off and flee in order to generate eggs. It's easy to forget about them when you get distracted by other things, but always keep an eye to the sky to make sure that you prevent the mob boxes from dropping. This event usually fails because of not enough eggs delivered as opposed to a team wipe, so keep blasting those eggs out of the sky. When the mothership approaches your basket, it will actually take eggs out of it as it remains connected. While it isn't too hard to push the mothership off before the damage is done, I recently learned an incredible tip. If you fire at it with the Stingray, not only will it get blasted off the basket, but you'll keep auto-killing the flying enemies as soon as they spawn out of the mothership, making the sky rain a beautiful cascade of eggs. The Mother Lode. And finally, number 50, when you finally won, revive any fallen teammates so that you can have a dance party and drop some booyahs. You're worth it. There's a ton to this mode between the various events, enemies, and maps, and I'm sure over time that we'll see more of them. But hopefully for now, these tips will help you, help your team, and of course, get more goods. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll see you guys next time with more Nintendo content.